Hi, I'm Damona Doyle at Oklahoma State University. I want to spend a few minutes talking about some financial record-keeping options for farmers and ranchers. I've met lots of people who are interested in something that does everything from production records to GPS tracking of crop production and farm finances all in one simple, easy-to-use tool that's free. Well, that's hard to come up with. So what I want to talk about is two good options for the financial component of farm records. Quicken is a popular personal financial record-keeping tool. QuickBooks is one of the dominant players in the small business record-keeping market. So we'll talk about the features, the differences between those, and some of the advantages of one over the other. I only half-jokingly say that everybody should use Quicken, and some should also use QuickBooks. And I say everyone should use Quicken not only because it's inexpensive, easy to use, user-friendly, but it also allows you to keep track of family living expenses. And everybody has a family, or everybody has personal expenses, and so Quicken offers you the capability of doing a good job of tracking those. And when the farm and family are intertwined as they are in agriculture, you've got to monitor not only your family living expenses because they may be dependent on farm income, or your family living and off farm income may support the farm. And so it's important to have a handle on both. But there are advantages to QuickBooks if you're an operator, for instance, who has payroll, who does accounts payable and receivable, and does invoicing and so on. So both are good tools. One may fit you better than another. So both are relatively inexpensive. Quicken's a bit less expensive. Quicken, I think, is a great place to start if you're graduating from a shoebox. It's relatively easy to use. It's flexible. It doesn't have the same accounting terminology, and so for people who are just getting started, it's a great place to start. It's able to grow with the business in that you can start with Quicken, and then if you find you need something more sophisticated, you can import that file into QuickBooks. And again, it allows for both farm and family records, which QuickBooks does not. So QuickBooks is on the order of $229 compared to Quicken's $60. It's a bit less forgiving and less easy to use, and it's also able to grow with the business. In both, you can start with simple labels for income and expenses and work up to multiple levels or layers of detail if you find that you need that for supporting your business decisions. Certainly QuickBooks allows for more sophisticated business use, and compared to Quicken, it is also a double entry accrual accounting package. And so people who have an accounting background, certainly tax preparers and accountants, prefer that accrual accounting capabilities in QuickBooks. That makes it a little more cumbersome for people who don't have that background. So let's look at the Quicken options. Now when we're doing our workshops and our materials, we'll start with Quicken Deluxe, and everything that we do in our basic workshops you can do with Quicken Deluxe. And that $60 investment will be good for several years, and so it's a really nominal fee to pay for a record-keeping package. Even if you decide that you need something more sophisticated along the line, maybe you've got some rental properties that you want to manage, $150 will get you an up-to-date package of that. So while the Quicken Deluxe is sufficient, I always encourage people to look at the features on the back of the package on the website that detail some of the additional options that the others have. And you can go online to look at up-to-date comparisons of that. QuickBooks, the kind of basic versions start at $230. You can see there are a lot more specific features listed on the website in terms of the comparisons. You can do payroll, you can track sales, sales taxes, and customer payments. You can look at and create invoices and a variety of different reports. You can accept credit and debit cards right in QuickBooks. So clearly it's designed for more internet savvy and linked businesses and supports a lot of the online functions that those businesses might have. More on the different QuickBooks products. Both Quicken and QuickBooks, you can export data to Excel. In QuickBooks, there's also an opportunity to import data from Excel as well as from Quicken and so on. Now, you do have the option to track some inventory in QuickBooks, which is difficult to do in Quicken, but I will caution you that it's designed for a retail business where you're stocking materials and have inflows and outflows of items that are purchased for resale. So while you can do some inventory for agriculture, it's still not really optimal in terms of the kinds of production records, either crop or livestock, that we might want to track. So again, Quicken's a cash accounting tool. QuickBooks is accrual. The key features of Quicken in terms of its use are its ability to track family living expenses, off-farm income, as well as investment income and expenses. And so they're fairly sophisticated features there. So if you've got an off-farm retirement account, if you've been buying some mutual funds and want to track those, Quicken does a really slick job of those. QuickBooks incorporates no investment income and expense features. The benefit, though, of using QuickBooks is that if you're doing invoicing, so if you've got a custom seed operation, for instance, and want to provide your customers with an invoice, you can do that. You can track then the invoice payment and accounts payable and receivable. In addition, you can do payrolls. You can set up individual employee records. You can set up different payroll schedules. You can calculate overtime. You can subscribe to actual payroll services if you want to, and you'll get up-to-date tax tables and so on to make the calculations appropriately. There are a few differences in terminology, as you might expect. In Quicken, what's called the file holds all your records, and so even if you've got one checking account in the file, you can separate and sort family living expenses from farm expenses. And you set up one or more accounts, a checking account, savings account, cash accounts, investment accounts, whatever is appropriate. And then you use labels for income and expenses, which are called categories, to identify the type of income and expense that an item is. You also have the capability to sort and summarize independently of that income and expense label using what's called tags. Tags allows you to do some enterprise accounting, so you can use tags, for instance, to identify an expense that is associated with the stocker operation, with wheat, with cow-calf, with pasture, whatever profit and loss centers you want to track in Quicken. You'll write checks to payees, and you'll indicate paid by fields in Quicken. In QuickBooks, on the other hand, you set up a company. Within that company, you set up a chart of accounts, and there'll be a series of asset, liability, and equity accounts. Your asset accounts can include things like durable goods. They can include fixed assets. You'll have liability accounts that are matched with loans, and then things like owner equity will show up in your equity accounts. Another component of the chart of an account is your income and expense items. And so again, if you've got feed, fuel, fertilizer, they'll be identified in your chart of accounts, whereas in Quicken, those are examples of categories. The equivalent feature in QuickBooks to tags is called classes, which again allows you to summarize expenses by project, by enterprise, by activity. And in QuickBooks, you have vendors and you have customers. When you set up your QuickBooks company, one of the choices that you make is with respect to your organization, and it's pretty critical to have that correct at the beginning. And so if you're a multi-member LLC, partnership, or LLP, you'll get a different default set of accounts in your chart of accounts. And so you can see at the left, you won't have a capital stock account. You will have payroll liabilities, you will have accumulated depreciation, you'll have a draw account that's set up, and crop sales will go into income gross receipts. In contrast, you have a bit different assignment in that you don't have the member partner if you're a regular or C Corp or S Corp. And at the right you'll see if you're a sole proprietor or single member LLC, which is treated basically the same. You don't have things like the accumulated depreciation is unassigned. You don't have capital stock, you don't have dividends paid, and your farm income and expenses will be attached to Schedule F so that you can do your tax reports at the end of the year. Data entry is also a bit different. In Quicken, you enter transactions in a check register that's much like your check register in your handwritten checkbook. You can write checks, much as you would in your personal accounts. You can enter payments, you'll enter deposits directly. Passwords can be set up either for your file or for individual sets of transactions. In QuickBooks, on the other hand, the recommended practice is to enter transactions in forms, for instance, starting with an invoice. You can then write checks, and they're set up more business style with vouchers attached to them. You enter bills, pay bills, assign check numbers in a process. You can also create estimates, create invoices and payments, and record receipts. In QuickBooks, you have multiple levels of passwords, so that, for instance, if you want to set up passwords so that an accountant or bookkeeper has a higher level of access than some other employees, you can do that. This is what the Quicken screen looks like in terms of data entry. So you can see at the left a listing of accounts in this sample file. You navigate around using menus at the top. When you enter transactions, for instance, you'll start with a date. You can enter the check number, the payee, the category, for example, is listed on the second line here. And so, for instance, our veterinarian, James Harriet, has a veterinary expense label, and the tag is assigned to the cow-calf operation. So that'll be the enterprise that gets charged with that expense. You're encouraged to reconcile bank statements with your accounts, and so you'll see an R in that cleared column. I've inserted or overlaid a split transaction to show you that, for instance, this J&M Farm Store transaction with the split includes multiple components. Here it's feed purchase for the cow-calf operation, as well as gas, fuel, and oil. And so you can split an individual transaction into a variety of categories as well as tags. And so the transaction at the farm store could also include expenses for stocker operation, for wheat, and so on. The layout for QuickBooks is a bit different, and so you can see the vendor component and the process that's recommended, from entering bills to paying bills. In the middle section you have customers. If you want, you can start with estimates, then create invoices, and then you match payments with your invoices, create sales receipts, and then eventually record deposits. You can also set up payroll, and so a variety of features are there. While you can turn on manual features, clearly Intuit's in the business of trying to market its payroll services, and so you have plenty of opportunities to subscribe to this. Entering bills is just like entering a check, but at the bottom in the voucher section, you can also add the income or expense label. You can put amounts, you can add memos, and again in the class describe what the enterprise or activity is. In our example here, we were capturing some screens from a flower grower who had both farmers market as well as did some retail to wholesale. When you get ready to pay bills, you mark more bills to be paid, checks to be written. You could have a whole series of here, print off multiple checks at a time. You can apply things like discounts if it's appropriate. You can just specify whether you're doing hand records, handwritten checks, multiple checks, and which account the expense should come from. So when it comes to payroll, Quicken, everything's going to be manual. You can set up income and expense account categories. So you can set up, for instance, on your expense categories, FICA, unemployment, whatever's appropriate. You'll have to calculate them manually and then enter them. You'll have to keep up with changes in tax laws and tables and rates and so on to make sure that those are accurate. On the other hand, QuickBooks provides a variety of payroll services and subscription options. You can enable the manual, but again, it takes a bit of work, and you can record a variety of employee records. Here's some examples of the kinds of employee records in QuickBooks that you have. So you'll have personal information, Social Security, and so on. You can set up a variety of payroll schedules and assign that employee to the payroll schedules and select whether they get paid, for instance, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or otherwise. You can set up different payroll schedules in terms of hourly rates, straight time, overtime, and so on. And then you'll set up the tax attributes of that employee as well. Here are some of the payroll options within QuickBooks. I encourage you to, if that's something of interest, to go online and look at and make the comparisons. They range from a minimum of about $135 a year, $12 a month, up to, if you want the enhanced payroll services, $99 a month. And so you kind of got to sort through what's important to you, look at the volume of transactions you're doing to make the decision about what's the right component of that. A few other things. Quicken has some nice financial calculators built in. So loan calculators, retirement calculators, savings calculators that I find really handy in looking, for instance, at potential loan payments. If you're looking at a new investment in a piece of machinery, for instance, or a new vehicle. You don't have anything like that in QuickBooks. QuickBooks certainly has an advantage when it comes to lists, so you can prepare a list of items. So in our flower grow example, for instance, if you're selling orchids and cut flowers of different species, from zinnias to roses, and also want to track a variety of vendors, from the country club to restaurants that you might sell to, those would be examples of customers, or to your vendors and employees. QuickBooks certainly offers better features in that regard. Here's an example of a sales by item summary. Again, the items are a variety of plants that our flower grower is growing, and you can see, you can summarize not only the quantity, but the amount, look at the percent of sales that each item provides, and that might help enlighten you as to where your important markets are. And so you can see in this example, 41% of the sales are from orchids, so suggests it's an important component of the business and may deserve additional energy and effort. Again, here's a graph in QuickBooks of sales by summary, which highlights that same information that we saw in that report earlier. And so you can see pretty quickly the top sellers. Some default reports. Quicken, of course, focuses on personal finance kinds of things. So you get banking, you get spending, you get tax reports, some easy answer kinds of things about where your money's going, as well as graphs. You can also create folders and save customized reports in those folders. For instance, if you have some reports like a quarterly cash flow that you regularly do for an ag lender, or maybe you want to look at machinery repair expenses periodically, whatever it is, you can save those in customized folders. In QuickBooks, there's more than 100 default reports focusing on company and financial, customers' receivables, jobs, time, mileage, if you're doing those kinds of things. So all sorts of reports that you can create there. Both have good online support, as well as a variety of resources available. And while I haven't linked in to or become a fan of their Facebook, Twitter things, they've got those kinds of options if that's something of interest to you as well. There's some other little features that you may or may not stumble on unless somebody teaches you. But when you go to enter a transaction, for instance, and you want to start with the beginning of the year, if you type a Y in the field, you get January 1st. If you type an R, you get December 31st. So I encourage people to play around with that, look for shortcuts. Both have nice find replace features, so if you find yourself with similar transactions but a misspelling of a name that you need to clean up in your records, both have find replace options that help you with that. Now in Quicken as well as QuickBooks, you can scan scan receipts and attach the little PDF file to the transaction so that you have a copy of that actual bill to associate with the transaction. You can download transactions from online accounts if your bank or financial institution allows that. For instance, I download my transactions from a credit card, and then all I have to do is change the labels on what kind of income or expense it is, so that saves me some record keeping time. I mentioned that you can export from both to spreadsheets like Excel, so if there's not a report that you can do easily in Quicken or QuickBooks, you can do that in a spreadsheet. Lots of graphs, you've seen examples of one or two so far. And both are pretty good about backing up so you don't lose data, but you also can change the backup or modify, edit the backup features to do it on a specific schedule if you want to do that. So quickly, we'll talk about some motivations for keeping farm records and how I think these tools kind of stack up against each other. Certainly people are motivated first by what they need to keep for tax purposes. I refer to this as the keep out of jail motivation. But lenders will tell you that records are really important in preparing you for the unexpected, and they'll say that more farms are lost to things like death, disability, divorce, disease, and so on than are by poor management. And so having a good set of records and communicating the results of those records and making sure that other people are aware of their existence and how to access them can be really important. And certainly they can be a valuable tool communicating with business partners as well as employees. If you're using QuickBooks, employee management can also benefit from these records. And of course, as a farm management person, I think there's a lot to be gained from the business analysis components of either tool. You can get a much better handle on your income and expenses on a timely basis. You can start to look at your cost of production per unit, what it's costing you to produce a 100 weight of beef, or what it's costing you to produce a bushel of wheat. And that information then allows you to compare yourself to benchmarks, to start to look at the strengths and weaknesses in your business, and to make improvements if you need or want to do that. So records for farm tax purposes. Quicken, maybe, well, really, I'd say that they're similar in terms of their ability to report farm income and expenses. There's a few little quirks, like QuickBooks doesn't have supplies as one of its default farm expenses, and so you've got to add that. But they're pretty close. When it comes to actually printing things like 1099s, QuickBooks would have an advantage. You can record 1099 in a memo line in Quicken, and then create reports at the end of the year that summarize those so you'll know who you need to send a 1099 to, but you can't actually print the forms. Obviously, QuickBooks has the advantage when it comes to payroll and W-2s. Asset sales and purchases both require some effort to do a neat job the way that we'd want to do it for farm purposes. In terms of being prepared, both do a good job with respect to your cash reserves, cash flow, and margins. Clearly, QuickBooks again has the advantage when it comes to employee records and accounts, recording your accounts, credit card numbers, those sorts of things. If you choose to do that, are equivalent in Quicken and QuickBooks. QuickBooks would have an advantage in assets and inventories. While you can develop a balance sheet in Quicken, it requires some effort, and you don't have the same ability to enter the same level of detail that you would in QuickBooks. So advantage to QuickBooks there. For planning ahead, the budget features historically have been better in Quicken than QuickBooks, surprisingly. And so if you want to do comparisons to actual, develop budgets from scratch, develop budgets that are based on historical transactions, Quicken has better features there. Again, when it comes to financial calculators, retirement planning, investment analysis, Quicken is much better. QuickBooks has none of those options. For estate planning purposes, good records are important, and it depends on how you use them, how much effort you put into entering the asset values on a cost and market basis and so on, as to whether Quicken or QuickBooks would have an advantage. It may be better just to set up a little spreadsheet to do that, because that would be easy to update and track on an ongoing basis. For communications, perhaps for your business partners, QuickBooks has an advantage given its emphasis on accrual accounting and business features. Again, with family living expenses, that may be important to communicate to your family along with farm expenses, and so Quicken has an advantage by offering both of those within that software. You can do equivalent kinds of things for lenders and landlords, and again, your errors goes back to estate planning kinds of features, and so I'd call it a draw on them as well. Employees, clearly QuickBooks, no question. You can do manual payroll externally in Quicken, but and do the same thing with QuickBooks if you want, but it's going to require some effort. Again, with enterprise analysis, the what's called tax feature is very flexible in Quicken. There are a few little quirks again in QuickBooks in that, for instance, for a specific paycheck, you can't break out an employee into multiple enterprises. So you could assign the payroll expense to overhead and then prorate that at the end of the year if you want to. But a few little limitations like that make me give the advantage to Quicken. Analysis by customer, analysis by item, financial statements beyond cash flow reports, QuickBooks wins easily there. You just can't do the items and customer kinds of things in Quicken. When I'm talking about people about record keeping, I always emphasize it's important to start simple. In either tool, you can develop some depth and breadth in terms of your record keeping, but start simple. Don't get overwhelmed or carried away in developing a lot of detail until you find that it's something you really need to support your decisions. And then both offer the flexibility to be able to develop more depth over time. Of course, being consistent is enabled by both of these, because pop-up lists are going to appear when you go enter a category or label for an income and expenses, and so that will help you. It's in the names of payees, vendors, and so on, where it'll be important to be consistent. Being disciplined is really the key to good records, and so that means setting aside some time on a regular basis to keep up with your records. If you put it off 6 months, doesn't matter which tool you're going to use, it's going to be an overwhelming task to dig into it. And so I encourage people to, if not weekly, keep things up on a bi-weekly basis, so that the stack of receipts and bills doesn't get too high beside the computer. There's lots of help available. I'm certainly happy to respond to calls and emails In many extension offices in around the country, there are people that have experience, so don't hesitate to reach out to try to get assistance. And I know record keeping is a chore, but it's something that if you'll develop some enthusiasm for it, develop a commitment for it, can certainly help better your business. We have a website that has fairly extensive resources for Quicken on it, including some little video clips that walk you through, for instance, setting up a file, importing a firm category list, and so on, answers to frequently asked questions. There's a manual with step-by-step instructions and screen captures in it that will walk you through step-by-step getting started. And you can download all those resources for free. If you don't want to print 130 pages or some subset of that yourself, you can always order the manual from us and we'll be happy to mail you one. I'm happy again to respond to calls or emails. I'm not always in my office, and so email is sometimes a better option. But if I can be of help or answer questions, particularly with respect to Quicken, or at a very basic level to QuickBooks, please give me a call. Thanks. Bye.